This overlay here, you'll see our. Turn it back on. Turn it off. There we go. Hello, welcome to Doglin Tales, some D&D in-depth podcast. Um, Today we're planning to chat about the concept of world settings in D&D and other tabletop RPGs. Guess we'll start with alphabetical of who's here tonight. Who we got?
That would be me, Eludria. My online handle starts with an A, so typically I go first, unless you've got like an underscore or something leading in. Pleasure to be here. Excited to be chatting about world settings. It's plenty to say.
Hey, it's Gats. Probably know me by now. I'm Gats.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Um, I love D&D. I GM. I play. If you want to see us playing, you could check out Beta the Ancients D&D on YouTube or Twitch, or you could check out Eludria's game. Yeah, there we go. Got to point that way. Eludria's game.
Here's a bold.
Heroes of Old, also YouTube and Twitch, and there's a two hands lurking from time to time in both games. Actually, speaking of,
Good time.
Hey everybody, two hands, got him. And thanks for having me. And audio is good, by the way. And yeah, looking forward to doing another session with Doglin Tales. Also looking forward to some more Heroes of Old, and eventually some Bane of the Ancients. And thanks for having me.
certainly. So, Allo, you suggested this topic of world settings.
True enough.
What's that?
True enough.
I heard rooting off. I was like, I don't think that's what he said.
True enough.
I'm gonna turn my volume up. There we go. Rooting off. So, my question for you is like, what world setting are you totally against? Like, what will you not play and what will you not GM?
Totally against. Okay, all right. That's a fun way to start this. I wouldn't say there's a particular setting that I like just won't do. I mean, unless the GM is just like a mess, right? And it's just like this poorly run, janky, like self-insert game. But that's not the world setting. There are some world settings that I'm not particularly partial to playing in, sci-fi specifically. It's just, for me, sci-fi, it can be really fun to watch, especially a well fleshed out sci-fi setting. But in terms of kind of playing in it, it's not really. I don't know. I don't get my fix with that. So I guess a GM of that setting would have to work a little extra hard to get me engaged. I find that kind of learning about the nitty-gritties of, say, engineering and the ways you'd make that kind of a setting fun to, like, enjoy and, like, get everybody immersed into a kind of sci-fi setting, it just doesn't mesh with my playstyle. It's not something I find myself, getting into all that much, as opposed to, like, it's magic. I don't have to explain it. How about you, though, Two Hands? Anything that you're hard against or not partial to?
Not really. I think that I found if the DM can get me excited about it, if they can get my buy-in on it, then consider me convinced. Guess I like to try to keep an open mind and see if they can take something that maybe I'm not so interested in and get me interested. It's a good litmus test for a good DM while you're at it is like, what's your ability to get people passionate about something that perhaps they weren't passionate about. So yeah, I think also intrinsically tied to it. Do you have someone who can engage other people in a story? And settings are a really important element of that. One of the building blocks and foundations. And I think that one thing that we all crave, perhaps unconsciously and then subconsciously, would be consistency, coherency, especially when it comes to narrative setting. If you have a DM who is, like Alu said, a mess, constantly forgetting elements of the story or inserting wrong elements that are out of place, perhaps even interjecting or rolling back too much stuff, you get the sense of mistrust. Not necessarily, like malicious mistrust, but it breaks your connection to the world, and can sometimes just break your connection to the game or to the other players. So just having consistency with the setting, if you do commit to some fundamentals, I think is also super important as well. So there's not only the content, but there's the approach to that content, which I think methodical is good, and also being able to invent on the fly while still working within a box, right? And I think that you can break that down into a couple little pieces, right? You can think, all right, well, I'm in over my head, I'm making stuff up. We're 2 hours into the session, and they went to east, and I told them not to go east, but here we are, and it's a great time. I need to figure something out for this place, and I don't feel like stopping. You got, all right, well, your physical, your historical, and your social element of what that might be, right? And I feel like the quicker you can break something down into smaller parts, that you can make smaller decisions about smaller pieces of that puzzle, you can expand on that and roll with it while staying in that creative box that kind of keeps you on a straight trajectory. And I think the beautiful thing about thinking small, and not getting too overwhelmed with breaking down those ideas is you can fix things in post and work out details in post. And it's not like writing a book either. You're not going to have to worry about writing yourself in a hole too much time if you're doing a player driven narrative, which I feel like most of the people that we're trying to advertise to are probably geared to a player driven narrative. Not saying there's anything wrong with a story driven narrative. I'm a sucker for a story narrative sometimes too. But that also helps because it could be up to your players to help do something with or decide what should be done with this setting that you've created.
Absolutely.
So bit of a tangent there, but that's kind of my answer. That's where my little tired brain took me.
Yeah.
No
Now, do you
worries.
remember
Woo!
the initial question? No.
What do I like and not like about the setting?
Yeah.
Right.
There we go.
Ah!
What about you, Gats? I'm curious. Are there any settings that you're just opposed to or like don't mesh well with? Where do your preferences lie?
Tasha's.
Or I guess not lie. Yeah, Tasha's. The setting of Tasha's. Yeah.
I will say
I don't-
I do
That one
sometimes
book.
get frustrated with when people try too hard to mix sci-fi and fantasy together to a point where it's like it goes to something I was going to touch on and that Tuan's already mentioned. Like, this needs to make sense within the parameters of the nonsense that we're already in for me to like buy into it. But if we're like, yeah, we're in this cool sci-fi world and we've got like, like say it's a Star Wars RPG, right? We're
There you
in
go.
the Star Wars world, which I love.
Yeah.
And we're in there. We've got force powers. We've got like lightsabers and stuff. And then you're like, yeah, well, whip out my like magic and my patron, and then I'm gonna like I'm gonna polymorph into a dragon, and I'm just like, oh.
I think Star Wars is a good example of that because that's a pretty good blend of high fantasy and sci-fi. They've got space wizards.
It's space wizards,
kind
right?
of, but they make sense, and they're.
They don't say that
Well, I mean,
Star Wars
they'll
makes
make
sense.
sense.
Star Wars doesn't make any sense.
They don't make sense.
I mean, but we won't go too far on a Star Wars rant. But I think a lot of the reasons why people cry out in outrage almost every time a new movie is released is because some fundamental belief gets shattered by some elements of a movie. I know for me, I can't even remember which one it was, but when they warped through a ship.
Yeah, just put it in warp drive. Easy.
That just
send like two dudes out there manning a ship.
It was awesome.
Empire gone.
It looked amazing. It was a beautiful scene, and it broke my brain. I was just like, no! Why wouldn't they just make the bullets like that? Why would they just send it? Just my whole the
Death Star. Like,
why wouldn't you just warp the Death Star into anything and it would just destroy everything?
That's what they were doing.
We didn't have
just fired smaller ships.
That kind of thing, right? and it was cool. Rule of cool, awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
Within reason.
and like in a D&D game, I'd be like, that was cool. You somehow maybe you timed it so it worked out, and all their shields were down, and they didn't see it coming, and you
Oh, their
bolstered
shields
you.
were
It
down.
just some, sure, you made it work. TPK, by the way, you're all dead. But you know, but
Bits of you are strewn about the quadrant.
yeah.
They earned it.
Yeah.
They earned that TPK.
But yeah, I guess I'll say there's not like a setting I don't like. I do have preferences. I prefer the fantasy setting, the not sci-fi fantasy setting, like on the cusp of technology setting. That's my favorite
Gotcha.
place to roleplay and to GM. Like, you'll hear me anytime I'm recruiting. People are like, "Do you have guns?" I'm like, Black powder is just kind of being utilized. You essentially have
Okay.
like fire cannons.
That's what you mean by on the cusp. Like,
Like
really just starting to get to some of those early,
not even a blunderbuss,
shady creations.
Like Princess Mononoke, not even that advanced.
Got a bunch of black powder and a ball on a stick, and you're hoping it doesn't take your hands off.
Not even a ball, like just a fire cannon in a barrel. Like that's where I like tech to be. And then as we play, we can kind of maybe shift that, right? To make some type of like crazy one-shot cannon things. But yeah, I think the big thing, Two Hands, you already mentioned, just as long as I can continue to have the world make sense with the given set of like quote unquote rules or expectations is probably a better way of phrasing it. I can have fun.
Immersion.
But yeah, like there are times where the fundamental like assumptions and bases of reality of this fake imaginary game that we're all making up together just get shattered with some nonsense, and I'm just like, nah, this is it like throws me out so far, and I can't focus on it anymore because I can pretend if I can like kind of imagine how it would all work, even with magic, even with bullshit sci-fi tech magic, whatever you want to call it, even with the Force, all that stuff. I can be like, oh, cool, we can keep this in a way where it like functions and makes sense. But as soon as like something comes out of left field that undermines this kind of basis of expectations, that's what really bugs me. It's like
I'm curious.
I can think of an example in
Yeah,
Heroes of Old.
Oh no!
No.
But also, please do.
A long time ago in Heroes of Old, which is a high fantasy setting that Alu GMs, I'd say mid to high,
far, far away. No.
in a spooky, crazy cursed island. But
Sealed off. Yep.
like I can't remember all the details of how this came to be, but I know that we were inside of a like dying or stasis body of a spider god in the abyss.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah. I did do that, didn't I?
And at some point there arrived inside of this body a sequoia, like a full giant sequoia tree.
If you don't know what that
It's
is, look it up. They're really
man.
pretty.
It's a very big tree. And like even that, I was like, okay, I'm here. Like we have this sequoia tree, and then like one of our party members picks up the sequoia tree like a bat, and then like starts swinging it around and spears it through the side of this spider god, opening a tear into another dimension. And I was just like, do you have any idea how much a sequoia tree weighs? Like that's my brain. I'm like, Jim, how tall is this sequoia tree? And you told me it was like some ridiculously tall sequoia tree, like 200.
Oh yeah, no,
foot.
we did the math.
It hurt me inside my brain as to how many tons this character with 14 strength score or something just kind of picked up and swung, because I was like, oh, why is this happening? But again, that wasn't a world setting issue. It was, I guess, a breaking of the established world setting that we had. That's what really got me. Maybe it's
not
just
necessarily, but you shared an example of when something outside of the fundamental setting really breaks immersion and is kind of off-putting, right? Something that doesn't mesh with the established world setting, the rules that we have of what to expect in the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
When can a shift in that dynamic or something out of left field be done right or really add to the setting or make
Oh.
for a memorable encounter that is positive? Like, do you have
Easily.
any experiences there?
Oh, easily. A lot of I mean, almost any really cool media that you have. Just little GM tip: if there's a movie or book you love, I guarantee you can turn that into an encounter. Um,
You would.
but yeah, I have and I would and I love doing it. But like an example of how you might do something really cool, maybe the party is in a sci-fi setting or something, right? But then they're walking through like this abandoned planet's forest. Like that would be a cool spot where you could throw in some weird, spooky, like fantasy stuff because you're on like a foreign world or whatever. I guess the reverse of that, which I want to do sometime, and I think you could do it really well and very tastefully, as long as your players don't groan too hard about the cameo. Is again, like if you have some scenarios where your party member is kind of off the beaten path, you could literally have them discover like this ancient wrecked metal thing and have it be a straight up spaceship from whatever sci-fi movie you want to drop on these guys, right? You could drop the xenomorphs right there. It could be a crash predator
Nah.
ship. The classic like, all right, well you found the ship, now see if you can get out of this jungle or forest alive kind of thing, or facehugger get some all kinds of fun stuff like that would be awesome. And I mean, they already have some kind of tools to do that in D&D, like just official Forgotten Realms lore. I mean, like if you look at the Mind Flayers and the Gith and all that, they kind of have spaceships already. I mean, they have the cool Spelljammer stuff coming out if you want to get into like the Magic Skyship, spaceship pirate aesthetic. But yeah, I mean I'm losing my track of thought there, but like the coolest thing that I want to do, I've even like prepped it a couple times, would be that straight up like predator encounter in the jungle that just comes out of nowhere. Like something shows up with this technology that makes no sense, and in this thing that makes no sense to this fantasy party, and you have to fight it off. Right? That sounds fun to me. But the way that might look, it's not exactly world shattering, I would say. Like, you're not saying like someone in the world that you're from came up with this, but something literally crashed from outer space or is from a different time or something like that. That's kind of the thought I have. What do you feel about that, Two Hands? Like, how would you go about dropping another genre into a game and have it be fun?
So, fun thing, if we ever continue playing Rudinia, you'll find out.
Mm.
But
when we continue playing Rudinia.
You were like on the cusp before I had a mental breakdown. But that's
I
okay.
need it.
I know, it's cool stuff.
We're mindful of mental health here, folks.
I think it's often through discovery. And I think that the type of discovery determines, I guess, where you go with it. So you have level of technology, which is a frontier that can change, and often changes through curiosity, through discovery, through experimentation, and sometimes through luck. And I think that's a big part of D&D is I found this thing. I like this thing, or this thing makes me feel nice. This thing makes me feel scared. I'm gonna interact with it. I'm gonna hang out with it for a long rest and see what happens. And trying out magic items or trying to figure out the secrets of an old building, an old fortress that you discover, new technology or lost technology. And the word technology doesn't have to mean sci-fi. Technology is a stick in a rock. Technology is the Bronze Age. Technology is iron.
Yeah.
Etc. Right? And I think I'm a big fan of just the scientific process and the process of discovery and how that shapes cultures, right? Because a lot of it comes down to just sometimes luck, and just what legs did you have up in the race of life, right? I mean, you have like different cultures around the world that had different resources available to them, at different levels of complexity, which like altered the culture, um, which was a part of their physical setting, which then became part of their history, as the culture developed around the means that were either made easier or made more difficult by what was accessible, right? Um, and I think that applies to D&D as well with discovery, and with setting and shifts in technology and in the setting and how that's used, like namely going from fantasy to sci-fi.
Mhm.
You find a power, you learn to use this power, and like to quote Thor from that Thor movie, science is just magic, no, magic is just science you don't understand, right?
Yep.
I think that's the coolest quote because it's true. I really like blending those ideas and those concepts and trying to do like the head math to make it believable, to keep people invested and to keep people bought into this idea that maybe this magic that we thought was magic this whole time was something else. And not to
Yeah.
take that sheen away from from magic, which is a cool idea,
Hmm.
but I'm more of a sci-fi guy. So like I'm gonna sci-fi something
Mm.
up, whereas like Gats is gonna fantasy something. Um, which it's okay to have different opinions, right? That's life's all about having cool opinions that you interact with other people about.
Hmm.
That's how I do it. Find things, probably sci-fi, and gear it towards technology and understanding it, or losing that understanding.
I
You
mean, that
play a great gnome.
yeah,
I'll give you that.
that's something I really like providing an opportunity for, in the games that I run, is like the magic technology idea, right? Like, can you one create your own spells or spell combinations to do crazy stuff? Can you use magic to create technological exploits in the world and in the game? And like there's some stuff I'm hoping that eventually the party in one of these campaigns will go to the Magic City in Nikoso, where there's all the colleges experimenting with the cutting edge of magic, because I haven't gotten to really show or tell that part of the story yet, but there are some shenanigans that you can come up with on things going on, and there is definitely some like,
I am
look at
in
this cutting
danger.
edge thing that we've developed. Nothing could go wrong with this, right? Let's do it, right? And
That's a
Powered
nuke.
by demons.
yeah, just
Exactly. Seen this movie.
just nothing wrong with
Ooh.
this. And like some of my other favorite, like I don't know if I know Alu has seen Venture Brothers. I don't know, Two Hands, if you've checked that show out ever, but I won't go too far into it. But there is this fun set of characters. One of them's the son of a super scientist who inherited his super scientist legacy, but he's just kind of a slacker, and he rents out like a library to a straight up warlock who like has a devil patron. And what's really fun is when they both like clash over something and they get in an argument about how it works. Like, this is their souls, these like memories, just like they go back and forth over and over, and like both other math both work for the same thing, but they get in horrible arguments about it. And sometimes, the science side uses some stuff they probably shouldn't. Like, they're like, did you use the ghost of an orphan child when you made this chamber? He's like, maybe. Like, so
Yeah.
so again, that like technology and magic definitely overlapping and being intertwined. I really like that. Um, it's just, yeah, something about the Eberron aesthetic I'm not a huge fan of. When I start thinking about it, I'm like, I love that, and then
Steampunky-ish. Steampunky adjacent.
it's weird. It's
You
like
know?
it's a steampunk sci-fi. I don't know. There's something about it. It's not that it's bad. It's not that I hate it. It's just something I'm not drawn to it personally. The
Okay.
whole thing. But I do like the idea of using magic and technology together to create crazy fun stuff. I love that idea. We've done that plenty of times. Um, Ali, you're gonna say something. I kept yammering. What were you saying?
Yeah, I'm just it got me thinking, right? In terms of that innate draw to a setting, I feel like there's different setting genres, right? You know, you've got high fantasy, low fantasy, sci-fi, dark fantasy, all these different
Anime.
genres. Anime. No, anime. Honestly, you right. I mixed that into my own game. Probably a little more than I'd care to admit.
Dude,
But
real quick, there was one game that I
mm,
played that was straight up just like this dude's freaking anime fantasy. It was like
they
every horrible anime trope that you like don't want
that
was
that right there
was the game at its
was what
core.
I was referencing at the beginning. It's like, you know, self-insert power fantasy. Like at its core, each of these different genres really excels at certain things, right? For high fantasy, it could be that whimsy, that that unknown, like having magic and things that you don't understand, having like the dawn of time, a world that's fresh to be discovered. Whereas sci-fi is, you've got that problem-solving aesthetic, like things make sense. If you get into the nitty-gritties, you can exploit the hell out of that, and everything has a mechanism, everything can be logicked out, right? To some extent. Whereas, say, dark fantasy, you like being afraid, or you're masochistic or something. I don't know. There's a draw to all of these settings, and I think there's, certain areas that each of these really excel at. And so it's interesting to see how DMs balance, people who enjoy, say, something another setting would do better at, like that exploration of, say, high fantasy, how they bring in and meet those needs in, I don't know, dark fantasy or sci-fi, or like how to balance that. Does that make sense? Or am I just rambling?
Both. Yeah.
Fair enough. I like
Yeah.
to do a balance here.
Yeah, definitely both. Um, I did remember one aesthetic that I didn't enjoy, and I joined
Oh.
it as a player. Um, I think I played one session, and I was like, "Ugh, no." Well, somebody was doing. I would call it an isekai style game,
Oh,
where
weird. Who'd do
you
that?
you come into it. I mean, it's so isekai is such a huge genre
Like,
within anime and manga right now. But it basically, if you know how to do something outside of the game, you can make it work in the game.
okay. Yeah.
And
So how'd that go?
I did not have fun. I
Oh.
was like, ah, it's cool if you want to have that power fantasy, right? It's that same
Okay, yeah.
power trip of like, you know all this stuff that people don't. It's that idea of like, what if you traveled back in time with all this stuff that you think that you know how to do, and then you change the face of the world? Probably wouldn't. You'd probably just get killed or starve to death or get really sick.
Sepsis. Or
Yeah,
like,
like, you probably just get wrecked. That's
Burned as
the
a witch.
yeah,
instantly.
starve. Just like something like that would probably happen, right? But
But the
that
fantasy's there.
that fantasy idea of like you could bring back the idea of like you go back to
Power.
the 2000 BC and you're like, I know how to make gunpowder and electricity, bitches. Like that's that kind of power trip wasn't super fun for me because I guess I'm more of a, if again another anime analogy, I like the whole shonen thing of like you overcome stuff and grow. You don't just come in with your god knowledge and like break the world. I don't know. I think there should be more effort in breaking the world. Myself.
Break it by force of
Yeah.
effort.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Root it. But yeah, it's hard to remember all the little games I've tried out and didn't like. I tried to forget lots of them.
That's fair.
But
Probably
the
don't need to keep that mental capacity saved up for those games.
the isekai D&D aesthetic, I'm not a huge fan of. Tuanch, you know what I'm referring to when I say isekai? But
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that. Not a huge.
If I thought hard, I could think of like some examples of some animes that I've watched. Where,
just
You don't have to think that hard. My
Yeah.
campaign setting has characters that are into
I
it.
hope to kill them when we encounter them because they're NPCs now, right?
They're technically NPCs in the world. I did a Final Fantasy 14 one-shot where people brought their characters into my world. Just kind of... That was an interesting... They're in there. They exist. It wasn't too much of a stretch. I limited any of the, like, techie shenanigans that they tried to bring in. But yeah, I think Isekai can be done well if everybody is responsible and communicates well, has a team, but this is really just like core player skills, not anything to do with the setting itself. So
I think I like the challenge of the separation of
gotcha.
real world knowledge and game knowledge, like a lot.
Fair enough.
I don't like the idea of like, if I can just figure this, if I can Google it, can I do it? Like I don't like that. You know what I mean? But we're getting a little off the rails. But yeah, if we see anybody with bunny ears and a human body, I'm gonna fucking eat them in your game. You're gonna die. I'm gonna spigot them, cook them up.
so here's one.
Yeah.
We've been talking about setting a lot. It's kind of
Yeah.
the subject here.
Yeah.
Some pros and cons of taking a beat to gauge interest in a particular setting, or have your prospective party, pick a setting for the next campaign that you run. I think we've all done that and have seen that go certain directions, and I think we all can speak to it. Let me start with you, Elu.
Oh
So-
no.
Yeah.
As odd as this sounds, don't. Don't let your players sway you into that. Like, on one hand, like, from a logical standpoint, if you step back and you look at it, it sounds like such a good idea. Hey, players,
Doesn't it?
what are you motivated by? What are you interested in? Perfect. I've already got this core foundation that you all are interested in. But I hate your idea and I'm not motivated by it. I'm gonna be dragging my feet. So, like, if you and your players mesh really well, yeah, get them hyped, get them stoked for something. But if you find that the setting they're really looking for doesn't line up with something you as a GM are wanting to run or something you're really passionate about, that fire's just not going to be there. And they'll feel it. And I've seen it really detract from the game. It's like, players can get really excited about a certain setting, but if that passion's not there from the GM's front, and you know it was something that you came up with on a whim, in the long run, I don't have good experiences with it. So sticking with something that you know well, sticking that with something that you're already passionate about, your players will get there. You know, that interest in the setting, like you said, Two Hands, being able to motivate your players, even if it's not like what they prefer, that's a GM skill, and it's, you know, a useful one to grow in, and something that I've seen work better for longer lasting campaigns. If you're doing a one shot, go for it. Baguettes, looks like you have something.
So I got a challenge on that because
Oh, please.
And I mean, there's a lot of context to season 5 of Boda the before that game started.
I was referring to that
This is
the perfect
indirectly.
question to ask.
Yeah, because what happened was we had a group of players. They all really wanted to do a Viking campaign. All but one of
Did
those
we?
players disappeared, besides Eludria, who was like so about the Viking aesthetic, right? He's like, yeah, I like the show Vikings.
Viking aesthetic sounds cool.
It
I
sounds
don't
cool.
really know anything.
I don't know anything about it. I'd like to learn more. Yeah. And so, like, the people who were super into it were gone. And then we got a whole new group of players who were like, yeah, that could be fun. And then when they got there, because again, it was like I'd already started building it. It was a world that I was fleshing out. I had a lot of fun putting it together. I like the kind of fantasy Viking culture that I made, right? I got pretty passionate about it. But the players, not interested. There's nothing I could have done to make them interested. They were like, we want to have a cookie store. I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I'm like, brutal Viking stuff. And they're like, Jays, no, don't do it. I'm like, All right, time to slit the goat's throat for sacrifice.
Why would you do that to the poor helpless goat?
Like,
You're like, this is dark fantasy Viking setting.
this is it was on the pamphlet, and you guys are like, no.
You didn't read the pamphlet.
So, yes, it can be a DM skill to sell a setting, but if the players don't like that shit, like they're not gonna like it. They're gonna be like, "You did a really good job. I want to go home." Like that's
Yeah.
and that's that's a thing to watch out for. Like, you know, maybe you are super passionate about a setting and you put this amazing world together and you fleshed it out and you've got all these hooks and cool cultural
Nobody cares
details
about it.
and then your players show up because like they're like, I'll say yes to anything if I can play, right? So they show up and
Big yikes.
they don't like the game. They don't like the world, I should say, or the part of the world that they're in.
Yeah,
And,
the setting.
and that can be sometimes really hard to figure out though, because most of the time I found players don't even know what they want, really. And it's really hard for them to figure that out until they find something they don't like the hard way. And then it's like, okay, do we shift the party to another setting within this world? Do we scrap the game? You should probably scrap the game.
Do we scrap the party?
Do we scrap the party? Do we
See, all of the above.
do we change settings? You know, and
Do we take a break and play some Deep Rock Galactic?
yeah, take a little hiatus, have someone else GM for a bit, do some short shots or something. Who knows?
Know
Like,
your audience.
I mean, like even thinking about it, I think most of you guys would have more fun doing like Chim Pokemon, crazy, silly Pocket Monsters style game, like just railroad, silly Pokemon Adventures, episodic stuff. But I still want to do Icewind Dale, so we'll see how far you guys get. Anyways, Tuans, what are your thoughts about your own proposed idea around this whole like buy-in? Do you dare let players have a voice? You know.
I don't know. I think that
Well said.
I don't know, man. Like the last time we talked about setting and like Rodinia, my world. I'm like, hey, here's what I want to do. How does that sound to you guys? Like, do you hate it? Are you interested? You know, I listened to you guys, but mostly I was like, yeah, I'm. This is what I'm offering, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and that was more of a singular choice. I'm going to give you a heads up.
Setting
Not
expectations
really
is helpful.
choice,
Yeah.
more expectation.
The
Yeah.
illusion of choice.
It wasn't even that because there wasn't a B. It was just here's A.
B is not blank.
That's not even the illusion
Yeah.
We
of
had a
choice.
choice.
It's
All
just like,
animals.
That's what I'm thinking. So
No animal has to
It's
work.
up.
But if you don't work, you don't get to eat.
yeah. I think.
but I guess at least offering what you are going to be delivering is a chance for someone who's like, whoa, man, no, I can't do that, you know, to
yeah.
have an opportunity to back out or at least be prepared to flake sooner rather than later, right? Because if you're going to have someone that doesn't like what you have to offer, you want them to
Give them that out.
not make a mess of things. Yeah. Many reasons.
It's a tricky one. Though.
So fun
Go ahead.
stuff about Alu's campaign where he has given us options to pick the setting and he has not given us options to pick the setting. I think I was a player in both examples, where one time we did the Monster Hunter campaign, which I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. Like, let's do some Harry Potter stuff, right? And then he was always like hinting, like, I've got this monster campaign that we could run, you know, it sounds pretty cool, this monster campaign. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I want to be Harry Potter. Like, and then finally, whenever I took a break on Rodinia after we got a good 20 sessions in, he's like, we're doing monster campaign. And I'm like, okay, I want to play.
Darn
I'm like,
straight we are. You gotta like it.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I would have never have played it or volunteered or voted to play it had you not made me do it. And
Don't worry,
Dan,
no one ever votes or volunteers to play it. It's
I
been
did.
years.
I did, but it was
Yeah.
not my first choice.
I am
Yeah.
aware. You're like, I've got an extra vote. I don't know, throw it in that ballot.
Yeah.
so yeah, but and it's working out. Like we're having a ton of fun, and yeah, it's been cool. So it's broken some of my expectations around how something like that might work, and that's just a limitation on my end because I can get really dogmatic in my interpretation of the lore and of what's available when I just easily forget the breadth of content material that there is out there for D&D, and that's just
Wild.
written material, not considering what someone might create or think of.
Homebrew.
And that's yeah,
Homebrew.
homebrew.
Homebrew
Yeah, so it's cool.
settings. There we go.
Hey, I like homebrew, but I don't know. That sounds like a whole nother theme. Like,
It is. That is
podcast versus
The art
podcast.
of homebrew.
Homebrew
Podcast.
versus module.
We're gonna
right? That should be a whole nother thing.
our next podcast, we're going to be
I like it.
fighting your content.
Maybe let's do that next
Funny.
time. Let's talk about that next time. Module versus a homebrew, because I think we've all got experience in both, right? You've done Strahd.
We should just
Yeah.
I've done Strahd, and I think that's the only module that I've ran out of the box. It was a glorious, just hot disaster, but we did it, and it was great.
You've ran
Maybe
it
we'll get
and
Joe.
played it, right? Haven't you
Yes,
ran? Yeah,
yes,
you
I
ran
played it all
and
the way
played
through
it.
and I ran it halfway. So
Nice.
Very nice. There you go.
So yeah,
I
maybe
think that'd be a ton of fun.
we could hook Joe in, I bet, with that one, because I want to get his insight since you both GM'd for each other for Strahd. That would be interesting. But yeah, what I've really struggled with is picking a world setting. Like I have a big homebrew world, right? And I've got all these little campaigns mapped out,
Yeah.
or at least campaign starting points. Like kickoffs, you could call them.
Yeah, I get you. I get you.
And like, I find usually by the time a player gets like into the game, they're so desperate to play, they won't. Either they're not self-aware enough, or they're not willing to tell me like what they actually want to do. If you know what I mean. They're just like, anything's good. Just let me play, man. I just want to play. And I'm like, you like this? This is what you want? They're like, I don't care, man. It's D&D. I'm good. And like, that's just not true. That's not how D&D or any other tabletop RPG works. Optimistically, people can say like, yeah, everything's good. I'm good. I'm just happy to be here. But like, man,
Are you though?
you get 5 sessions in and you're gonna realize, oh shit, I hate it here, or like, like the setting is horrible. There's nothing as a player that draws me to this aesthetic or this world or this lore or this culture. I mean, that's something I was talking with one of my players about in this last season 6 of Boda, was like, they found that they did not like Icewind Dale or just the North. And I'm like, yeah, I can tell. Is there something we can do to remedy that? Can we? Is there something about Icewind Dale, this frozen North wasteland, that we can make interesting for you as a player? Because you thought you might like it, and now you're in it, and it kind of sucks for you, and that's not good. You don't want to have a player stuck playing this game they hate. Like, say you really like lush forests and wild rolling hills, and someone's like, yeah, you're in an ice desert for 10 levels plus, so
Got it.
yeah.
Oh no. Oh goodness.
That's where you are now. Sorry.
That's really getting into setting inside of setting, right? Like, we've talked about the genres. Then we start getting into like the two other parts, right? You've got like,
well, that's the
environment.
It's an important level of the setting, I think. Like, do you throw the game into a jungle environment? Are you guys desert? Are you Underdark? Like, that's important. You can have all of it available, but like, not all the time. Two hands, I saw you.
Right.
You're like, what's up?
It's coming to me, right? So we all have a story to tell that spans both time and space, right? AKA the
Oh,
world
yeah.
that we create. Some things to think about with setting is where in your timeline of your world should this campaign start, and whose perspective should be most accessible at this point of entry into your world. Where should it start in your world geographically? Just because you think of a story or think of a world doesn't mean that your campaign has to start at the beginning of the world. And I think a perfect example of this, and we always come back to it, is Star Wars, right? Star Wars. They're like, yeah, fucking episode 4, because like we're gonna do some stuff. It's all world building. 1 through 3 is all world building. Really boring. We don't have the budget to make all these clones. We'll get to it in 30 years.
Yeah.
I think it's a definitely something to pay attention to when you're thinking about dropping a campaign in a world that you created. Is where, when, how. Yeah, so I have to say about that.
For sure. Yeah, I think I just thought of something that really bugs me as a player joining some games. So, and I'd also accuse it as an issue I had with Game of Thrones when I first started trying to watch it. If you are, I think it's just a storytelling issue too. Like, but if you are like, man, the world is amazing, and all this crazy cool stuff happened, but you weren't there. Now we're here in this boring ass part where you're it's like, you know, where the GM
I really want to tell that story.
writes this book in their head about how amazing the world was, right? Doesn't give you any of the details or even like the cliff notes on that, but just like, oh man, it was amazing. Too bad you guys are just poor farmers. Like, there's nothing good that's gonna happen. Like, just defend your village from poverty and giants or something, right? But like the real heroic arcs and the story and all the interesting shit, it's done. It's done. Doesn't you weren't there. You're not going to be there. You're not going back in time. That already happened, right? That does bug me. And it's kind of an advice just from a storytelling standpoint. Like, if you're a GM and you're writing your world mythology or a homebrew history, and you're getting really into this one part of it, and you think like that's such this rich lore and all this interesting shit's going on. Like, two things: one, think about, do you want to GM or just write? Because you could just write. And then two, why did I do two?
The right option.
Two, maybe consider dropping your party into the middle of that shit. And one thing you can do, and a lot of people do, is you can tell the party up front how the story's going to end. They have no idea what goes on from beginning until there.
Eric, do you know it?
You guys are going to be in this epic battle with this like 13 Baylor demons on the top of this mountain, and you're going to lose. Like, all right, we're starting here. You know, like that's like that is a cool way to do it. And I've played some short shots like that, and I've had a blast. I think it sometimes is really freeing for the players to kind of know how it's going to end. I don't know what it is about it, but like, for example, when Soren ran his short shot where we were enlisted into this like army fighting off, I don't even know what the hell we were fighting. I know there was a crazy Dracolich or some shit that showed up. That was bad. But he told us straight up, he's like, you guys are going to fucking die.
You're going to die.
You're going to die. I'm just telling you, before we even make characters, you're going to all die. We basically, the short shot was cool. It was a 3-parter. We only did 1 part because...
We got really quickly to that grand finale. We're good at that.
We just kept going. Like, it was supposed to be broken up more. But so, like, we started out and we got, like, picked up from our hometowns. And it was this high fantasy setting. We got picked up from our hometowns, put it through boot camp. We actually role-played boot camp, which was fun. Fantasy boot camp. And then we got thrown out into this like Starship Troopers D-Day bullshit against the
Yeah.
enemies.
Nice.
And they had this Draculus just fucking us up. And we're like, we're trying really hard to like do our battle formations and like synchronize our attacks and just Draculus, you know? And I don't know, it was a freeing feeling. To just kind of know, like, we're gonna die. You don't have to be worried about dying. Just live your life, be your character. They're not gonna live through this. Somehow my character did live through it. I don't know why. But that was the only one who did.
For a goddamn cinnamon roll, and you know it.
A cinnamon roll? What?
Yeah.
Oh, I know
There's-
why he did it. I know why he did it, because he didn't tell us ahead of time, but I should have put it together. We were supposed to play our characters' kids. There was this whole like big last party where where everybody like got laid, but I played a lesbian character, and not only did I play a lesbian character, but I also didn't find anybody that she liked that night. So I think he's like, shit, if I don't let her live, he's not gonna have anyone to play the sex session with. So I came out like missing a fucking shoulder, like gone, messed up, old grizzled elf lady, like gonna like teach these youngins how to fight Draculiches. I don't know. It was cool. But yeah, I've got off topic, but I think if you are doing a story, if you're writing down the most interesting part, maybe consider letting your players be part of that. I think that's a really big thing to think about. I definitely have an alt campaign planned for if folks, god damn it, I want Rajink. He was the tie-in. Fuck Two Hands. Anyways. Two Hands was the tie-in to a really interesting part of my Homebrew World's history. That's a character Two Hands played as an NPC. Didn't go well. But not his fault.
That is an understatement I've ever heard one, but that's not the topic for tonight,
for
folks.
lack of trying.
Not his fault.
I tried about as hard as Evan McGregor did in the prequels. Like, Gary, this game.
You tried. You tried.
Oh no.
But
You're out of line.
But I
He's not
didn't
wrong.
speak common.
you didn't. Oh.
Should we just have somebody translate for him? Nah.
No.
That's actually that
tired.
could be another thing. That could be another fun part of setting, right? It's just the culture of the area. You could throw in the difference of like what are the different primary cultures? You know, do they speak different languages? Is that something you're wanting the players to have access to? You know, trying to figure out how to communicate with this entire section of the game, or like trying to go about like bridging that gap.
I've got a silly question.
Go ahead.
So say we're looking at like, you know, science and magic, which I think they really are combined. That's kind of implied with a wizard, right? They're taking the fundamentals of magic, breaking it down into formulas, and spewing out new spells, right?
Correct.
That's like canon in Forgotten Realms, especially if you get into the books and you can, like, well, Elmaster made this spell and like whatever like a lot of the spells named after people is because they're little scientist nerds who like want to have their name on there, right?
Correct.
So,
Oh yeah.
say you have this wizard spell, comprehend language, right? Does that really do all languages, or is it just all the known languages to the scientific realm or the magic realm at that point? That's something you could think about as a GM. Like, yeah, you use comprehend language. That part looks like it's an elf letter. Again, it's how particular of a GM you're being. Like, you know, do you want them to just have the info, or do you just got to be a little sneaky butt about it? Sometimes being a sneaky butt is fun. Sometimes you like to breadcrumb it.
Yeah, gets.
I do it.
I'm aware, keenly aware. So,
but yeah, with your world building, that should be like a whole nother topic. Maybe the one after the next one will be world building. But yeah, thinking about like not just, oh gosh, sage advice, how does this spell work? But like, how does this spell actually function in your world setting? Is it this scientific combination of available resources around you, like magic as a resource, whether it's the weave from Forgotten Realms or just what happens when you mix these components together? Like, this shit just happens. Like, it just does this. Or there's
Alchemy
some,
from Full Metal Alchemist.
yeah, alchemy from Full Metal Alchemist. There's this implied crazy magic flowing around, or maybe like if I were to guess with Two Hands' world, there's the whole like some crazy stuff happened and now there's weird stuff that shouldn't be here and it's allowed us to have probably magic and sci-fi powers like these floating teleport crystals of doom all over the place that are in the sky just emanating chaos and destruction and falling people that you can save but not really. There's you saved him. He's worthless. Live and die. Okay. Um, but yeah, I think with your something to think about as a GM, it can really make your world feel richer, and it gives a lot of your casters an avenue for roleplay and exploration. Is how does magic actually work in your world setting? Is it this kind of science, or is it like you're connected to ley lines, or is there literally a god managing all of magic and just kind of lets people tap into their Wi-Fi if they know the password? Like how you want to have magic available can really open up your world or close it off, and get you frozen as a GM if you worry too much about sage advice. But yeah.
Well said.
Oh goodness. But yeah, magic's fun. I got a
And
question.
sometimes a
never-
cigar is just a cigar, right?
Yeah.
If you worry too much about it, be like, all right, cool. Cast fire.
Kiss fireball, room's gone.
Magic. It's magic.
So Two Hands, with your kind of preference towards a sci-fi twist to all of your magic, maybe, right? Do you prefer kind of the like high magic levels, like where a lot of people have access to it, or the kind of low or medium? What do you You like both?
I like, I truly enjoy surviving off of just intellect, skill, and luck. Just one thing I'm really enjoying about Alu's monster campaign right now is that we are alive because we haven't run out of luck or ideas yet, or the ability to execute on them. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I also like when there's high magic and shit is blowing up, shit is getting crazy. I truly like both, and I'm always in the mood for either or.
Cool. That's you.
Or if they were ever combined, like, hey, we did a great job, we have all this cool magic, and then we got dropped into this anti-magic zone or something, or our powers got taken away, and now we have to start over from scratch and learn to live again in a completely radically different way. Like, I love all of that.
Speaking of Full Metal Alchemist, right? So anti-magic is an interesting one. My head hurts whenever I start thinking about anti-magic zones because there's all these like little asterisks in the like vanilla content of how it affects what. They're like, you can do these things, but these people's and the patron spawns aren't broken with warlocks, but this is fine, but this works and this doesn't. So if you're gonna throw an anti-magic zone, make sure you think through what your PCs are capable of and what you want to do to them. How about you, Aller? What do you like, player and GM wise, as far as high, mid, low, fantasy, magic, power?
You see, I'm a fan of doing whatever I'm in the mood for in the moment.
I can attest to that.
Which, so for context, there are areas of my island that there are wizard schools. Like, you go there and magic is the default.
Not anymore.
You are like, you're not. Shut up. You're not. You're not
They're
gonna
gone.
be able to get into that area. You're not gonna be able to start that setting without magic. I even ran a setting where I'm like, all right, this is a high magic setting. Every single person knows magic. Like, even if you're a farmer's boy, you probably got some cantrips because it's such a huge part of way of life. And then what happens when the magic turns off, or what happens like when the magic goes bad, and then exploring that, right? Then I also have areas where in my world magic isn't really even a thing. And so if you've got like a warlock in the setting, it's very tribalistic, it's very shamanistic, where it's like that person has magic and we don't understand them and they're scary and it's going to undermine all of the fundamental ways you understand magic in D&D because while you have the written way the spell works, the world is going to be interacting to you very differently than what you're probably expecting. And that those different interactions can be a lot of fun. So I guess it's really what sounds fun in the moment. It can vary, you don't have to lock yourself into one or the other. It can be a very large, flavorful world, unless it's fundamental to the entire inner workings of your entire setting. That there's either like no, little, some, or a lot of magic, right? But even then, you can have pockets. I really like to mix it up because I think there's a lot to be gained from each of those options. And I want players to be able to find that niche and find something that they're comfortable with. I value flexibility in my games. Because, I mean, what you said earlier, just about, like, what if the players don't like your setting? What if the players are just hating a particular area or a particular part of your game? And my answer is usually, like, I just
Swap it.
fix it.
Yeah.
I usually just fix it. So I guess I'm pretty flexible in that regard.
But here's it.
I thought of
so many things, but Joanne, you go first.
Ooh.
a fun idea in regards to setting and magic is what taboos are associated with.
Oh
magic.
yeah. Oh yeah. Like necromancy is that common one, right? Necromancy, bad, paladin, good.
Just talking magic in general, level of understanding. Maybe something cataclysmic happened in your world, and now all magic is just considered just bad luck. Brings destruction. You show up and you're like, yeah, can't comprehend languages, and everyone's like, a small crowd starts gathering, like pitchforks and
Yeah.
Do you ever?
Oh!
Have you ever seen the old the British Merlin series?
Ooh, that's.
I have.
that's a good
I'm
one.
aware, but I have not watched them.
You should check that out sometime. It's like a good background show. Not that you ever have capacity for that, but it's that setting. Like magic has been outlawed, but Merlin's like, I'm gonna go be a sorcerer. And it's Camelot. It's a silly like not sci-fi, a fantasy drama, but yeah, magic's illegal. Like if you cast spells, they're just gonna fucking decapitate you. Like that's the rule of the king. They're just gonna kill you, no questions asked. If you're implied that maybe like someone slips like a magic rune under your pillow and someone tells on you, they're gonna just kill you.
Oh no!
But it's a lighthearted fantasy show.
Sorry.
Yes. And what's fun about that is also adding like why that fear, like what happened. I had like 3 thoughts come up, and the one that I could remember. So what do you do when you've got a campaign running, and it's in a world that you like pretty well? It's not your favorite, but you like it pretty well, and you've got one player who just doesn't like it, but the rest of them like it pretty darn well. One
Can
of
we
them
define doesn't like it?
Yeah, so one player can't get into it. They find nothing in the area that they enjoy. There's nothing they're motivated by. They're just kind of, at this point, there to support the other players' endeavors. Because unless they do that, there's nothing to motivate them. Say you've also got one player who's like highly motivated, really looking forward to what they can do in this setting. Another one who's like pretty interested but flexible, and the other one who's there to like engage in whatever's there, is not picky, is just kind of enjoying playing. But the issue is you've got one player in your world setting. Let's just use Icewind Dale for an example. This frozen tundra wasteland. It's very consistently a frozen desert tundra wasteland. Like there's not. Like, you go out and find some like hot springs in the tundra, but that's still it's a tundra with hot springs in it. Like it's not like you wander
Might
around
be like 5 or 6 trees.
Yeah, you don't turn a corner and you're like, oh, we're not in the tundra. It's like we're now in the tundra mountains or the tundra ice
The ultra
fields,
tundra.
or the tundra
It got
glaciers.
worse.
Yeah,
A sea of moving ice.
yeah,
like
just it's all snow. It's all cold. It doesn't really change, right? And
Alpine.
one player just is like, ugh, the setting kind of not feeling it.
Okay.
What do you do? Oh, you got a
Well,
cusp. Go for it.
well,
Besides ask and probe, like, is there something I can do to make it fun? Say like they're just like, nah, but I'll try and have fun for other people, kind of thing.
okay. I mean, I'd just be curious about like, so what is the fundamentally, what would you want to change about the setting? Like, right? Is it the specific locale? And if
Yeah,
so, okay, so if it is the specific locale, how do you get breaks in there where there might be some variance? Frozen tundra could be frozen alpine foresty areas. Frozen tundra could be, like craggy peaks in the mountains. Frozen tundra could be we're now inside of like an outlet town that feels lived in, and although harsh, could be the same as some border town, and you can get similar interactions.
yeah, they don't like towns.
Or, oh yeah, well, maybe, as a DM, sometimes it's important to recognize that maybe a player's not, like, just not a good fit. Like, there are settings or campaign styles that certain players just aren't going to mesh with. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, it kind of is what it is. Each person is wanting to. Go ahead. You got that?
So, say you want to try and keep them in. That's my
Aha.
challenge. That's the challenge, right? Of course, it's
Okay.
always like, hey, the setting's not what you like. You should probably look for another game. But say you're trying
You're
to
keeping them in.
spice up the game. They want to stay in. You want them to stay in. The other people are wanting them to
Okay.
stay in. You've got this module that you're running, even. Like, say you're
You know-
running straight up Rime of the Frost Maiden.
Icewind Dale. Yeah.
Icewind Dale, and
Uh-huh.
one of the players far in is just like, I just can't enjoy this world part. I just don't like this region or this aesthetic. It's just not attractive to me. And I've more experienced it with like playing in like desert stuff. I mean, this is an ice desert, right? But it's that same kind of thing. This like, I think most players I've played with or GM'd for really like the kind of lush mystery of like mountains, forests, and plains.
Yes.
Right?
Classic.
Or like fantasy
I feel like
Australia.
as humans
right?
were drawn to that. We're like,
Yeah.
this is livable. This good. Like,
Yeah, but when you get into
nuts.
a straight up like, yeah, it's a barren sand. You're on the planet where the movie and books Dune take place. Like, it's just Arrakis, right? I think that's what they called it. It's just fucked, unless you're like in a cave or in this little fortress, or like you're in this crazy tundra wasteland, like in
You know what? All right,
Thing.
all right, all right, all right. You want them. Here's the thing. You want them to stay in the game. They're not going to like or care about your setting, the specific region and biome that you're in. We can work with that. Time to flex those player skills. What kind of encounters do you like? Why are you with the party? What kind of interactions do you enjoy? How can we get other things that you love in this game? Yeah, you hate where you're living, but you're still living, and we're gonna work with it.
Cue
So-
Owlbear.
Like, yeah, exactly. Also, don't be clicky.
Yeah.
Other people don't know what you're talking about. But to give context, yes, he is giving an example of exactly what I just shared. Even if you don't like a setting and they're wanting to stick with it, the setting isn't the end all be all. The entire game is not just, so you're still in the tundra. What tundra activity are you doing it? No. No. There are interactions, there are encounters, there are left field things that you're not going to expect. Mystery, whatever the hell you want out there. that, yes, it's not in the most ideal setting for that specific player, but there are other ways to get them engaged. Because if the only way a player can be engaged is if they are standing in a forest, that is a fundamental player flaw that they should probably be working on.
Yeah, I don't think that's
If
the
they
issue.
want to, or find a game that's in a forest. You do you. I don't know.
I don't think that's the issue. I think for this particular player, it really is just like the aesthetic. They're not vibing with it so much, but
Yeah, that
that's
makes it tricky.
that's exactly the kind of answer I was hoping to get from you. Is you can balance that world setting issue with engaging encounters.
You hear that, folks? I did it.
You did it.
Yeah.
You did. You did it.
Not just encounters, too. You just the thing about setting is it's as big or as small as you need it to be, and I think that we often forget that this big world that is happening around us isn't our daily lives. In that scenario, yeah, the desert is around us and is among us, but right now, all that matters is that I'm in a tavern talking to this guy named Big Jim, and there's some guys over there who are probably going to fight us, but like, you know what? I'm reading the room, and none of that has anything to do with the desert, and it could happen 100% faithfully in a desert.
Mhm.
I think that's just like a reality check on what are you fixating on, and why, and what's your reason for playing, and how can you use your passion or dispassion to focus on how you can enjoy the game, given that in life you're not going to always like everything that you're stuck with or exposed to, knowing that like no decision is going to make everyone happy, and that if you try as a GM to make decisions that make all of your players happy, you will end up with unhappy players and an unhappy GM. The game is going to be ruined, and at some point you have to try to acknowledge that we're usually all adults here playing, and that we need to find a way to make our hobby fun for us, knowing that
Absolutely.
it's happening in a dynamically generated environment.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it.
I actually
That's
really
a fixed versus growth mindset approach.
Mhm.
So,
I like what you brought up there, and I feel like it'd almost be motivating, right? It's like if you are stuck in an environment that you don't like, and your DM isn't a dick, right? And it's like, no, you have to stay in the setting. Like, there are times in life where you're gonna be in a situation that you don't like, whether it be you stuck in a job that you just hate, whether it be that you grew up in a small town and you need to get the fuck out of there. Like, that can be motivating. You're like, how do I get to the point where I and my character in this party can like overcome these obstacles and move forward to another chapter of your life so you can even appreciate that even more. Like, that can be a motivator in a sense, right? At
Certainly
least
can
that's
be. But
something I'm thinking.
not all players looking to do that, I will say.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
I think
That's a
think
good point to bring up.
I
With
want to.
mindsets.
I think we should
Appreciate
wrap
that.
up here on
Yeah.
that nice point the two hands brought together of just like,
Chef's kiss.
given the world setting you're in, you want to continue. You're with friends or players or GM you want to stick with. If you aren't liking your world setting, what can you focus on? What can you ask about? What can you engage with in this world besides just the aesthetic that can make the game fun for you? And, it's not always possible, but it's certainly something to think about if you're a player struggling to kind of engage with the world that you're in. Again, it could just be this like, maybe I'm in this like steampunk. I'm playing an Eberron campaign. God damn it, it's Eberron. I just don't want to be here.
Yeah.
Right? It's like ghosts, but sci-fi and fantasy. I hate it. No, I don't want this. It's not even steampunk. What is this? Right? It's like history ghosts.
Yeah, okay, Gats. All right.
So instead of doing that and focusing on all this shit that just bugs the hell out of you, if you really want to play in a game, like, what can you make fun with what you've got? What can you talk to the players and GM about what can we do that's fun, and like what can you focus on that's interesting and engaging for you, instead of focusing on the snow drifting outside in the streets. Like, what's maybe look around at the different NPCs at the tavern, like Two Ends was talking about. Are you
Yeah.
gonna fight them? You gonna fuck them? You gonna bribe them? You gonna eavesdrop? What are you gonna do?
Even just talk to them, interact with them.
You
No,
could
but,
you could be like, "Have you heard any rumors?" And then I could tell you guys what the rumors are.
all right, so pulling it back here, that actually does remind me that last point from me. I'll be quiet. But that's pretty in line with one of my own life philosophies that I try to follow, right? It's like, as a human, there is always going to be a million and one more things that you don't want in your life than things you actively do. So it's a lot easier, more productive to focus on what you do want, right? You're like, even just having that as your core focus, that's what your brain's going to be building connections to. That's what you're going to be working towards,
Yeah.
rather than spending time actively focusing on the things that you don't enjoy. Because there's only so many things that they'll bring you joy in life, that will make a campaign setting, time spent among friends enjoyable, memorable. So
Yep.
focusing on that. Good stuff.
Another topic, focusing on what you want instead of you don't want. But we should probably call it. It's been over an hour. The little podcast. And you've got a GM tomorrow, and then I've got a GM the next day, and we all have lives.
Yeah, I work tomorrow morning.
So let's call it here for our world setting ramble. Thank you, Alu and Two Hands, for joining on Doglin Tales tonight. I always
for having
appreciate
me.
chatting you guys. And thanks for anybody who tuned in and eavesdrops or is watching this in the future past. Congrats. Let's do a little round of good nights, unless anybody has one last little thing you want to say about podcasties. Two Hands, you got something. What is it? What is that?
Nope.
No?
No, I'm good.
I want to say goodnight
Go
and
for it.
farewell. I appreciate you tuning in. I'm Aludria. I'm going to be GMing Heroes of Old, Uniting the Tribes, tomorrow evening. Going to be starting about 6 p.m. Pacific time. I'm pretty stoked. You'll actually see both of these two lovely individuals there if you tune in. Anyhow, I appreciate you. Stay safe out there.
Hello. Yeah, let's do our goodbyes. Hey, it's Gats. Welcome to Doglin Tales, Doglin Gaming's podcast about D&D in depth. And yeah, Two Ends and I are going to be playing in Heroes of Old tomorrow, Friday, at about 6 p.m. PST. And if you want to see me trying to GM while being a tired dad, you can always tune in to Bane of the Ancients D&D Saturdays at 6 p.m. PST on YouTube and Twitch. And that's me. We'll get more of these podcasts coming, and hoping to get a tips and tricks series out on YouTube here soon. We'll see. Oh, it's in the works. Over to you, Two Hands.
All right. Thanks for having me, your resident local Two Hands. And yeah, you'll see me tomorrow playing some Heroes of Old. And maybe one day you'll see me GM. Not right now, but maybe one day. Maybe I'll stream it. And yeah, I think that we do an episode where we just pull up random homebrew and roast it.
You know, I'm for it.
Xbeta 3 does a pretty good, goes on D&DB, and he's like, all right, worst rated magic items ever created, and just, looks at them. It's pretty good. Go check that out.
All right.
Check out. All right. I'm going to start winding down these streams here. Of course, we've got the 15